The heavy iron door of the bunker groaned, protesting against years of rust as Sarah shoved it open. She stepped into the stale, pressurized air of the corridor. Her flashlight beam cut a sharp white path through the thick, swirling dust, illuminating nothing but bare concrete and shadows. "Where is Eli?" she whispered, the sound dying instantly in the vast, tomb-like space. The silence of the underground facility was absolute, heavy enough to feel against her skin. She took a step, her boots crunching loudly on a carpet of shattered glass. She stopped. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, a rhythmic dripping of water from a pipe hit the floor. Drip, drip, drip. The sound echoed off the walls, marking time in the suffocating stillness. She gripped her flashlight tighter, the metal cold against her palm, and pushed forward. Every shadow seemed to stretch as she passed, but there was no movement, no sign of life. She reached a junction, the beam of her light flickering over empty doorways. The air tasted of ozone and decay. She checked the corridor again, her eyes straining against the gloom. Still, nothing. She moved deeper into the dark. She pushed into the main control room. The space was a graveyard of dead technology. Consoles stood dark and gutted, their power cores ripped from the chassis. A single chair lay overturned in the center of the floor, its metal frame twisted. Sarah knelt, her flashlight beam catching a glint of silver near the base of the desk. She picked up a small locket. She clicked it open. The photo inside was obscured by a thick smear of dried mud. She wiped it with her thumb, but the image remained unreadable. A sudden movement in the periphery of her light caught her attention. She stood, sweeping the beam across the floor. A trail of dark, wet footprints marked the concrete, leading away from the chair. They were damp, glistening in the harsh light. She followed them to the far wall, where a ventilation grate hung slightly ajar. She knelt again, pressing her hand to the floor. The moisture was still cold. The trail did not stop at the wall. She gripped the edge of the grate and heaved. It slid aside with a screech of metal. She crawled into the narrow, claustrophobic tunnel. The metal walls scraped against her shoulders, biting into her skin. She forced herself forward, driven by the realization that she was chasing a path someone had carved only minutes before. The tunnel narrowed until the ceiling pressed against her back. Sarah pushed, her elbows raw from the friction against the corrugated steel. She reached the end, the air growing colder and smelling of ozone. She gripped the grate, pulling it just enough to peer through the narrow slats. Below, the laboratory was bathed in a harsh, clinical light. Eli stood in the center of the room, his palms flat against the air, his body rigid. Opposite him, a man stood with his back to the wall, his thumb hovering over a black detonator. Sarah held her breath, her chest tight against the metal floor. She shifted, and a flake of rust fell, clattering against the grate. The sound was tiny, but Eli's head snapped toward her. Their eyes locked through the narrow gap. Eli's expression shifted, his jaw tightening. He shook his head once, a sharp, desperate movement that signaled a warning. Sarah gripped the edge of the grate, her knuckles turning white. The man's thumb began to press down. The click echoed through the ventilation shaft. The man pressed the button. A low, guttural hum vibrated through the floorboards, followed by the heavy, metallic thud of blast doors slamming shut in the laboratory below. Sarah lunged at the grate, her fingers hooking into the steel mesh. She pulled with everything she had, but the frame remained immovable, bolted from the outside. She pounded her fist against the steel, the impact jarring her arm to the shoulder, but the metal did not yield. Beneath her, a hiss erupted from the ceiling vents. Thick, white gas began to pour into the lab, swirling around the floor. Eli stumbled, his knees buckling as the vapor rose. He pressed his back against the wall, his chest heaving, his eyes searching the room for an exit that no longer existed. Sarah screamed his name, but the sound was thin and distant, trapped within the narrow confines of the shaft. She clawed at the grate again, her knuckles splitting against the sharp edges of the steel. The gas thickened, turning the laboratory into a blurred white void. Eli slumped, his movements slowing, his hand reaching out toward the empty air as if trying to catch a ghost. The ventilation fans roared to life, a deafening mechanical scream that swallowed her voice and the last of her hope. Below, the laboratory light flickered once, twice, then died. The white gas vanished into the sudden, suffocating blackness. Sarah pulled her hands back from the grate, her fingers trembling, her skin raw and stinging. She pressed her forehead against the cold, unyielding metal. The roar of the fans began to wind down, fading into a low, rhythmic whine that eventually ceased. Silence returned to the bunker. She sat in the dark, the weight of the locket the only thing tethering her to the world.